The medical frigate Mercy's Dawn drifted peacefully through the void between star systems, her hull gleaming white with the universal Red Cross symbol painted across her sides. Captain Sarah Chen stood on the bridge, watching the stars through the viewport while her crew of 200 medical professionals tended to their patients in the ship's advanced hospital bays below. The Mercy's Dawn was humanity's pride in space medicine, equipped with the most sophisticated medical technology Earth could produce. Her mission was simple yet vital: provide emergency medical care to anyone who needed it, regardless of species or political affiliation. For 3 years, she had served as a beacon of hope in the Outer Rim territories, saving lives and earning respect from dozens of alien civilizations. Dr. Marcus Webb, the ship's chief medical officer, emerged from the elevator with exhaustion written across his face. They had just finished treating survivors from a cargo ship accident near the Proxima trading routes. 17 different species had been aboard that vessel, each requiring specialized medical attention that only the Mercy's Dawn could provide. "Captain, the last of the Zephyrian patients are stable," Webb reported, wiping his hands on a sanitizer cloth. Their silicon-based physiology responded well to the new treatment protocols. "We saved all 43 survivors," Chen nodded with satisfaction. This was exactly why humanity had built ships like the Mercy's Dawn. When other species saw humans, they often expected warriors or traitors. Instead, they found healers who would risk everything to save a life. The communication array suddenly crackled to life. Lieutenant Rodriguez at the comm station straightened in her chair as an urgent signal came through. "Captain, we're receiving a distress call from the Kepler mining colony. Multiple casualties reported from a mining accident." "How many?" Chen asked, already moving toward the navigation console. "Initial reports suggest over 300 injured, various species. They're requesting immediate medical assistance." Chen didn't hesitate. "Set course for Kepler colony, maximum speed. Alert all medical teams to prepare for mass casualty protocols." The Mercy's Dawn changed course smoothly, her engines humming as they pushed through space toward the emergency. The crew moved with practiced efficiency, having responded to countless similar calls over the years. Medical teams checked equipment, prepared operating theaters, and reviewed treatment protocols for the dozen species known to work in the Kepler mining operations. Dr. Webb coordinated with his department heads via holographic displays in the medical bay. "Dr. Yates, prepare Trauma Bay 1 for Centaurian physiology. Their dual circulatory system means we'll need specialized equipment. Dr. Kim, ready the bio-reconstruction units for potential radiation exposure cases." As the ship approached the mining colony, something felt wrong to Captain Chen. Her years of military service before joining the medical corps had taught her to trust her instincts. The Kepler system seemed unusually quiet, and she couldn't see any signs of the massive rescue operation that should have been underway. "Rodriguez, try to contact the colony directly. I want to speak with their emergency coordinator." The communication officer worked her controls, but only static answered their calls. "No response on any frequency, Captain." "That's strange for an active mining operation." Lieutenant Commander Torres, the ship's tactical officer, frowned at his sensor readings. "Captain, I'm detecting multiple ship signatures in the asteroid field near the colony. Configuration unknown, but they're definitely not human or any registered mining vessels." Chen's unease grew stronger. "Full sensor sweep, Torres. I want to know what we're dealing with." The tactical display lit up with new contacts as the sensors penetrated deeper into the asteroid field. What they revealed sent a chill through the bridge crew. 12 warships of unknown design were positioned around the mining colony, their sleek hulls bristling with weapon systems. "Captain," Torres said quietly, "those aren't rescue ships." "And the colony?" "There are massive hull breaches in the main habitat domes. This wasn't an accident." Before Chen could respond, the alien ships detected their approach. The lead vessel, a massive cruiser with angular armor plating, turned toward the Mercy's Dawn and activated a powerful communications array. "Human medical vessel," a harsh voice spoke through the comm system, the words translated by the ship's universal language processors. "You will surrender immediately and prepare to be boarded. Any resistance will result in the destruction of your ship." Chen looked around her bridge at faces filled with shock and confusion. The Mercy's Dawn carried no weapons beyond basic defensive systems. They had always relied on their medical status and the universal respect for hospital ships to ensure their safety. "This is Captain Chen of the medical frigate Mercy's Dawn," she responded firmly. "We are responding to a distress call from this colony. Under the Galactic Medical Conventions, this vessel is protected as a non-combatant hospital ship." The alien commander's response was swift and brutal. "Your medical conventions mean nothing to the Vorthon Empire. You will surrender or be destroyed." Chen's military training took over. She had heard of the Vorthons in intelligence briefings, an aggressive species from the far rim that had been expanding their territory through conquest and intimidation. But attacking a clearly marked hospital ship violated every principle of civilized warfare. "Dr. Webb, get all patients to the emergency pods immediately," she ordered. "Torres, activate our beacon. I want Earth Command to know what's happening here." The Vorthon commander apparently grew tired of waiting. "You have 30 seconds to power down your engines and surrender, or we will open fire." Captain Chen made a decision that would echo throughout the galaxy. She had sworn an oath to protect her patients and crew, but she had also sworn to uphold the principles that humanity stood for. If the Vorthons wanted to destroy a hospital ship, they would do it knowing that the entire human race would learn of their crime. "Rodriguez, send an emergency transmission to Earth Command. Full details about the attack on the colony and the threat to our vessel. Make sure they know the Vorthons are deliberately targeting a hospital ship." The transmission burst toward Earth just as the Vorthon warships opened fire. Energy beams lanced through space, striking the Mercy's Dawn with devastating force. The ship's shields held for a few precious seconds before collapsing under the overwhelming assault. Emergency alarms blared throughout the ship as hull breaches appeared in multiple sections. Dr. Webb and his teams worked desperately to evacuate critical patients while damage control. Teams fought to keep life support online. Captain Chen remained on her bridge as her ship died around her. The last thing she saw was the tactical display, showing Vorthon boarding shuttles approaching her vessel. The last words she spoke into the ship's log were simple but prophetic. "The Vorthons have made a terrible mistake today. Humanity will remember what happened to the Mercy's Dawn. We always remember." The emergency transmission from the Mercy's Dawn reached Earth Command 17 hours after the attack, traveling through a relay network of communication satellites that spanned hundreds of light years. Admiral Victoria Hayes was reviewing fleet deployment reports in her office at Luna Base when the priority alert chimed on her personal terminal. As she read the transmission, her face grew pale. The message contained sensor logs, video footage, and Captain Chen's final report. The Vorthons hadn't just attacked the Mercy's Dawn. They had systematically executed the crew and patients after boarding the vessel. The hospital ship's black box had transmitted everything before being destroyed. Admiral Hayes immediately convened an emergency session of the Terran Defense Council. Representatives from every human colony and military district gathered via holographic conference within 2 hours. The mood in the virtual chamber was unlike anything Hayes had witnessed in her 30-year military career. "Gentlemen and ladies," Hayes began, her voice steady despite the fury burning in her eyes. 12 hours ago, the Vorthon Empire committed an act of barbarity that violates every principle of civilized warfare. They attacked and destroyed a clearly marked hospital ship, then murdered over 200 medical personnel and patients in cold blood. The holographic displays around the chamber showed the faces of humanity's military leaders, each reflecting the same mixture of rage and determination. Colonel Martinez from the Mars Defense Force spoke first. "Admiral, our intelligence on the Vorthons suggests they're testing our resolve. This attack on the Mercy's Dawn wasn't random. It was designed to see how we would respond to the murder of our medical personnel." General Thompson from the Outer Rim Command nodded grimly. "Our deep space reconnaissance reports that Vorthon forces have been massing near human territory for months. They're preparing for something larger than a single ship attack." Dr. Elizabeth Warren, Director of Interspecies Relations, joined the conference with obvious distress on her face. "I've been in contact with our allies throughout the galaxy. The destruction of the Mercy's Dawn has sent shockwaves through every civilized species. Hospital ships have been considered sacred for over 3 centuries of galactic civilization." Admiral Hayes pulled up tactical displays, showing human fleet positions across known space. "The Vorthons made a critical error in judgment. They assume we're a typical spacefaring species that will respond to aggression with diplomatic protests and trade sanctions." She highlighted several sectors on the star map where human colonies and installations were located. "What they don't understand is that humanity doesn't just fight for territory or resources. We fight for principles. And when someone murders our healers, our doctors, our nurses who dedicate their lives to saving others, we don't negotiate. The Admiral's next words carried the weight of absolute certainty. We're going to war. The room fell silent as the implication sank in. Humanity had fought defensive actions before, protecting their colonies from pirates and aggressive species. But this was different. This was humanity choosing to go to war over a principle, over the murder of medical personnel who represented the best of human values. General Park from the Asian defense sector raised a concern. Admiral, our current fleet strength might not be sufficient for a prolonged campaign against the Vorthan Empire. Their intelligence reports suggest they have over 300 capital ships. Hayes smiled coldly. General, you're thinking like our enemies expect us to think. The Vorthans believe this will be a conventional war fought with standard fleet tactics and orbital bombardments. They've studied other species' military doctrines for centuries. She activated another display showing classified military projects that most of the Council had never seen. But humanity doesn't fight conventional wars. We adapt, we innovate, and we find ways to turn our enemies' strengths against them. The first classified project revealed advanced stealth technology that allowed ships to operate undetected in enemy territory. The second showed new weapon systems based on principles that other species had never developed. The third display made several council members gasp in surprise. Project Retribution has been under development for 5 years, Hayes explained. We always knew that someday we might face an enemy that would force us to show the galaxy what human warfare really looks like. Dr. Warren looked concerned. Admiral, if we escalate this conflict beyond conventional warfare, we risk losing the support of our galactic allies. Many species already view humans as unpredictably aggressive. Dr. Warren, Hayes replied firmly, our allies need to understand something about humanity. We're not aggressive by nature. We're protective. When the Vorthans murdered medical personnel who had dedicated their lives to saving others, they didn't just attack Earth, they attacked everything we stand for. She stood and addressed the full council with absolute conviction. The Vorthans want to test human resolve. They're about to discover that there's a significant difference between aggression and righteous fury. Every human colony, every ship, every military installation will contribute to this effort. Admiral Hayes outlined the first phase of humanity's response. We're not going to mass our fleets for a conventional assault on Vorthan territory. Instead, we're going to demonstrate that attacking humans carries consequences that extend far beyond their current understanding of warfare. The plan she presented was unlike anything in recorded galactic military history. Rather than trying to match the Vorthans' superior numbers with conventional forces, humanity would leverage their greatest advantages: adaptability, technological innovation, and an absolute refusal to accept defeat when fighting for their core values. The Mercy's Dawn was more than a hospital ship, Hayes continued. She represented humanity's commitment to preserving life, regardless of species or politics. The Vorthans destroyed that ship thinking it would intimidate us into avoiding their expanding empire. The Admiral's final words to the Council carried a promise that would soon echo across the galaxy. Instead, they have awakened something in humanity that our species has kept carefully controlled for generations. The Vorthans wanted to see what humans do when truly provoked. They're about to find out. Within hours, every human military installation received new orders. Ships that had been conducting routine patrols were recalled for special operations. Research facilities shifted their focus to military applications. Colonial governments received requests for resources and personnel that indicated the scope of humanity's planned response. The galaxy was about to witness humanity at war, not fighting for conquest or expansion, but for the principle that some things are sacred, even in the darkness between stars. The Vorthan High Command received their first indication that humanity's response would be unlike anything they had anticipated when their border monitoring stations began reporting strange readings. Admiral Kethvar, Supreme Commander of the Vorthan military forces, studied the intelligence reports with growing confusion. Explain these sensor anomalies, he demanded of his intelligence chief, Commander Zraktal. Our monitoring stations detect human ships approaching our territory, but they disappear from sensors before our patrol fleets can intercept them. Zraktal manipulated the holographic display, showing flight paths that seemed to end abruptly in empty space. Supreme Admiral, our technicians believe the humans have developed some form of advanced stealth technology. Ships appear briefly on long-range sensors, then vanish completely. Kethavar dismissed this concern with a wave of his armored hand. Irrelevant. Stealth technology is useful for reconnaissance, but it cannot change the fundamental mathematics of warfare. We possess over 300 capital ships. Human records indicate they have perhaps 60 vessels capable of meaningful combat. The Vorthon military doctrine was based on overwhelming superiority in numbers and firepower. For generations, they had conquered species by demonstrating that resistance was futile against their massive fleets. The destruction of the human hospital ship was intended to demoralize humanity and force them to accept Vorthon expansion into their territory. Commander Zraktal seemed hesitant to voice his concerns. Supreme Admiral, our intelligence on human military capabilities may be incomplete. The attack on their medical vessel has provoked an unusual response. Our deep space monitors indicate significant movement throughout human space. What kind of movement? Kethavar inquired, though his tone suggested he found the question tedious. All human civilian shipping has ceased in border regions. Their colonies have implemented what they call total war protocols. Our sources suggest they're mobilizing resources on a scale that seems disproportionate to their actual military capacity. Kethavar considered this information while studying star charts, showing Vorthon territorial expansion over the past decade. Every species they had confronted followed predictable patterns: diplomatic protests, defensive fleet positioning, and eventual capitulation when faced with superior numbers. The humans are simply attempting to appear more formidable than their actual capabilities allow, he concluded. Their total war protocols are probably defensive measures designed to protect their civilian population while they negotiate surrender terms. 3 days later, the first human strike proved how catastrophically wrong Kethavar's assessment had been. The Vorthon supply depot at Nexus Prime was considered impregnable, protected by overlapping defensive grids and a permanent garrison of 12 warships. The facility coordinated logistics for the entire Vorthon expansion into the Outer Rim, processing resources from conquered worlds and redistributing them throughout their empire. Senior Commander Vrakesh commanded the depot's defenses from the Central Command Center, monitoring sensor feeds that showed routine patrol patterns around the facility. Nothing appeared unusual until his tactical officer reported an anomaly. Commander, long-range sensors are detecting multiple objects approaching the depot. Configuration unknown, but they appear to be moving at velocities that exceed normal ship parameters. Vrakesh examined the sensor data with growing alarm. The objects were indeed moving faster than any known starship design, but more troubling was their trajectory. They weren't approaching like attacking vessels seeking tactical advantage. They were approaching like artillery shells. Raise shields and alert all patrol ships, he ordered. Prepare defensive batteries for incoming attack. The objects continued their approach, accelerating to speeds that should have torn apart any conventional spacecraft. As they drew closer, Vrakesh realized with horror that they weren't ships at all. They were projectiles. Massive kinetic weapons launched from impossible distances at relativistic velocities. The first kinetic projectile struck the depot's primary shield generator with the force of a small stellar explosion. The shields collapsed instantly, and secondary impacts followed in rapid succession. Each projectile was a simple chunk of dense metal accelerated to devastating velocities by human magnetic launch systems positioned throughout their territory. Within minutes, the supposedly impregnable Nexus Prime Depot was reduced to expanding clouds of superheated plasma. The 12 defending warships were destroyed before they could even identify the source of the attack. No human ships were detected in the area, only the aftermath of weapons fired from light years away. Commander Vrakesh's final transmission reached Vorthon High Command just as his command center was vaporized. The humans, they're not fighting like any species we've encountered before. They're not using ships. They're using the entire galaxy as their weapon. Admiral Kethavar received this report while reviewing intelligence from other border regions, where similar attacks had occurred simultaneously. 7 Vorthon installations had been destroyed in coordinated strikes using weapons that no conventional military doctrine had prepared them to counter. How is this possible? He demanded. Our intelligence indicated that humans prefer close-range combat and rely heavily on boarding actions and infantry warfare. Commander Zraktal consulted updated intelligence reports with obvious concern. Supreme Admiral, it appears our intelligence was based on human conflicts with pirates and raiders. We never observed them fighting a war against a peer military power. The tactical displays showed the devastating effectiveness of humanity's opening strikes. Vorthan forward bases, supply depots, and communication relays had been systematically destroyed, using kinetic weapons launched from impossible distances. No human ships had been detected during any of the attacks. The humans have turned their entire star system into a weapons platform. Sraktal continued. They're not moving fleets to attack our positions. They're using fixed installations to launch projectiles across interstellar distances, Kethvar studied. The battle damage assessments with growing unease. The humans had eliminated nearly 20% of his forward infrastructure without risking a single ship in direct combat. This was warfare on a scale, and with a ruthlessness that violated every assumption about human military thinking. Recall all border patrols to defensive positions around our primary bases, he ordered. If the humans want to fight at interstellar ranges, we'll consolidate our forces where their projectile weapons can't reach us. But humanity's second phase was already beginning, and it would prove that distance meant nothing when an entire species decided that some principles were worth any sacrifice to defend. Captain Elena Vasquez commanded the stealth destroyer Shadow's Edge as it materialized from hyperspace at the edge of the Keth Prime system, home to the largest Vorthan military installation in their expanding empire. Her ship was one of 12 vessels participating in humanity's second phase of retaliation, and unlike the kinetic bombardment that had opened their campaign, this operation required precision and direct confrontation. The Shadow's Edge was invisible to Vorthan sensors, thanks to adaptive camouflage technology that had been secretly developed over the past 5 years. The ship's hull could mimic the background radiation of space, making it effectively transparent to all known detection methods. Captain, reported Lieutenant Chen from the sensor station. I'm reading 43. 14 capital ships in defensive formation around Keth Prime. They've pulled back from their forward positions after our initial strikes. Vasquez nodded with grim satisfaction. The Vorthons were learning that conventional tactics meant nothing against human warfare, but their consolidation around their primary bases actually played into humanity's strategy. Dr. Reeves, she called to the ship's science officer, are you ready to implement the biological warfare protocols? Dr. Sarah Reeves looked up from her specialized laboratory station with obvious reluctance. As a xenobiologist, she'd spent years studying alien physiology to develop better medical treatments. Now she was being asked to use that knowledge for purposes that went against every principle of her scientific training. Captain, I want to emphasize again that what we're about to do violates the Galactic Biological Weapons Convention. If other species learn about this capability, humanity could face universal condemnation. Vasquez understood the moral implications, but she also remembered the footage from the Mercy's dawn. The Vorthans had executed wounded patients in their hospital beds, showing no mercy to medical personnel who had dedicated their lives to healing. Dr. Reeves, the Vorthans made their choice when they murdered our medical personnel. Admiral Hayes's orders are clear. We demonstrate to the galaxy that attacking human medical facilities carries consequences that extend beyond conventional warfare. The biological weapons that Dr. Reeves had developed were specifically designed for Vorthan physiology. Rather than killing outright, they would induce a progressive paralysis that left victims conscious but unable to control their bodies. It was a fate that many species would consider worse than death. Deploy the atmospheric infiltration pods, Vasquez ordered. Target the primary military command center and the orbital defense platforms. The Shadow's Edge launched a series of small, undetectable pods that drifted toward Keth Prime's atmosphere. Each pod contained billions of specially engineered viral agents that would spread through Vorthan air recycling systems within hours. While the biological attack proceeded, the other 11 human stealth ships positioned themselves throughout the Keth Prime system. Their mission was to observe and document the effectiveness of humanity's psychological warfare campaign. Admiral Kethvar was reviewing defensive strategies in his command bunker when the first reports of illness reached his attention. Initially, the symptoms seemed like a minor respiratory infection affecting personnel in the orbital defense stations. Medical teams report that affected personnel are experiencing muscle weakness and coordination problems, his aide informed him. The condition appears to be spreading rapidly through the ventilation systems. Within 6 hours, the true scope of humanity's attack became clear. The biological agent was specifically designed to target Vorthon nervous systems, causing progressive paralysis that began in the extremities and worked toward the vital organs. Victims remained fully conscious and aware as they lost control of their bodies. How many are affected? Cathvar demanded, though he already suspected the answer would be catastrophic. Supreme Admiral, over 70% of personnel in the orbital defense network are experiencing symptoms. The paralysis appears to be permanent, and our medical teams have no treatment that shows any effectiveness. Cathvar realized with growing horror that the humans hadn't just attacked his military infrastructure. They had demonstrated a capability that made conventional defense impossible. If humanity could deploy biological agents that specifically targeted Vorthon physiology, no Vorthon installation would ever be truly secure. Dr. Reeves monitored the biological agent spread from her station aboard the Shadow's Edge. The viral weapon was performing exactly as designed, spreading through Vorthon air systems and affecting military personnel while leaving other species unharmed. "Captain," she reported, "the biological agent has achieved 95% saturation in the target facilities. Vorthon military effectiveness in this system has been reduced to negligible levels." Vasquez felt no satisfaction in the success of their mission. What they had done was necessary to demonstrate humanity's resolve, but it represented a line that could never be uncrossed. The galaxy would soon learn that humans possessed weapons that could selectively target any species. Dr. Reeves, transmit the antidote formula to Vorthon command frequencies. We want them paralyzed, not extinct. The antidote transmission included a message that would be recorded in Vorthon military archives forever. This biological agent was deployed in response to the murder of medical personnel aboard the hospital ship Mercy's Dawn. The antidote is provided as a demonstration of human mercy, a concept that Vorthon forces failed to understand when they executed wounded patients. Admiral Cathvar received the antidote formula along with detailed specifications of the biological weapon that had crippled his forces. The technical data made it clear that humanity possessed the capability to develop similar agents targeting any known species. They could have killed everyone in this system, he realized with mounting dread. Instead, they demonstrated that they can disable our military forces at will, while leaving survivors to carry the message. The psychological impact was exactly what humanity had intended. The Vorthons now understood that their numerical superiority meant nothing against an enemy that could wage war using principles they had never encountered. Commander Zaractal reviewed the technical specifications of the human biological weapon with obvious fear. "Supreme Admiral, if they can engineer agents that specifically target our physiology, our entire military doctrine becomes useless. Traditional shields and armor provide no protection against biological warfare. The implications extended far beyond the current conflict. If humanity possessed the technology to develop species-specific biological weapons, they could potentially neutralize any alien military force without risking their own personnel." "Sir," Zaractal continued, "our intelligence networks are reporting that other species throughout the galaxy have received copies of the technical specifications. The humans aren't just demonstrating their capabilities to us. They're showing every spacefaring civilization what happens to species that violate their principles." Cathvar understood that humanity had fundamentally changed the nature of galactic warfare. They had introduced weapons and tactics that made conventional military thinking obsolete, and they had done it in response to an attack on medical personnel. The message was clear. Humanity would escalate any conflict to whatever level necessary to defend their core values, regardless of the consequences for established galactic order. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session on the neutral station of Concordia Prime, located at the intersection of 12 major trade routes. Representatives from 47 spacefaring civilizations gathered to address what many were calling the most significant shift in galactic warfare since the development of faster-than-light travel. Ambassador Lyrian of the Centauri Confederacy called the session to order with obvious concern. "Fellow representatives, we have gathered to discuss humanity's response to the Vorthon attack on their medical vessel. In 3 weeks, the humans have demonstrated military capabilities that fundamentally challenge every assumption about modern warfare. The central display showed tactical analyses of human operations against Vorthon forces, kinetic bombardment from interstellar distances, stealth technology that rendered ships invisible to all known detection methods, and biological weapons that could selectively target specific species had eliminated nearly 40% of Vorthon military capacity without a single human casualty. Ambassador Telvar of the Arcturus Republic spoke first, his crystalline features reflecting the chamber's lighting. The humans have violated multiple galactic conventions with their use of biological warfare. Such weapons have been banned for over 2 centuries precisely because they threaten the foundation of interspecies civilization. Dr. Elena Vasquez, humanity's representative to the Galactic Council, stood to address the assembly. She had been recalled from her position aboard the Shadow's Edge specifically to explain humanity's actions to the galactic community. Honorable ambassadors, she began, humanity acknowledges that our response has utilized methods that challenge established galactic conventions. However, we must address why such methods became necessary. The display shifted to show footage from the Mercy's dawn before its destruction, medical personnel from dozens of species working together to save lives, the universal Red Cross symbol prominent on every bulkhead, and the clear identification as a non-combatant medical vessel. The Mercy's dawn represented everything that civilized species claim to value: the preservation of life, medical neutrality, and humanitarian assistance without regard to politics or species. The Vorthons didn't just destroy a ship, they executed wounded patients in their hospital beds. Ambassador Telvar interrupted with obvious agitation. The Vorthon attack was deplorable, but humanity's response threatens the stability of galactic civilization. Biological weapons that can target specific species could be used against any of us. Dr. Vasquez nodded acknowledgement of the concern. Ambassador Telvar raises valid points about the implications of species-specific biological warfare. Humanity developed these capabilities precisely because we anticipated that someday we might face enemies who would commit atrocities that demanded an unprecedented response. She activated another display, showing human medical facilities throughout the galaxy. For 50 years, human hospital ships and medical stations have provided emergency care to every species without discrimination. We have saved millions of lives from civilizations that have never offered us anything in return. Ambassador Kethalaran of the Draconian Empire leaned forward with interest. Are you suggesting that humanity developed advanced military capabilities specifically to protect medical personnel? Not just to protect them, Ambassador, but to demonstrate the consequences of attacking them. Every species in this chamber benefits from the medical neutrality that allows hospital ships to operate in contested regions. The Vorthons threatened that entire system when they deliberately murdered medical personnel. The chamber fell silent as representatives considered the implications. Many civilizations had relied on human medical expertise during emergencies, and the principle of medical neutrality was indeed fundamental to galactic stability. Ambassador Lyrian spoke carefully. Dr. Vasquez, while the Galactic Council sympathizes with humanity's motivation, your species' response has introduced weapons and tactics that could destabilize interstellar relations for generations. Dr. Vasquez had prepared for this moment. Throughout her journey to Concordia Prime, humanity's leadership had debated extensively how much to reveal about their true military capabilities, and they had decided that partial truth was more dangerous than complete honesty. Honorable ambassadors, humanity has maintained a deliberately limited military profile for decades because we understood that our approach to warfare differs significantly from galactic norms. We prefer to solve conflicts through diplomacy, trade, and medical assistance. She paused to ensure her next words carried appropriate weight. However, when forced to fight for principles we consider fundamental, humanity does not limit itself to conventional military doctrine. The kinetic bombardment, stealth technology, and biological warfare you have witnessed represent only a fraction of our actual capabilities. The chamber erupted in concerned murmurs as representatives realized the implications of this revelation. If what they had seen was only a demonstration, humanity's true military potential was beyond current galactic understanding. Ambassador Telvar demanded clarification. Are you threatening this assembly with superior military force? No, Ambassador. I'm explaining why humanity has maintained peaceful relations with all civilizations until now. We understand that our approach to warfare could be destabilizing if applied broadly. That is precisely why we limit its use to situations where our fundamental principles are threatened. Dr. Vasquez activated a final display showing casualty figures from the conflict with the Vortons. In 3 weeks of warfare, humanity has eliminated nearly half of Vorthon military capacity, while suffering 0 casualties. We could have achieved complete victory in days rather than weeks, but we chose escalation that would demonstrate our capabilities while allowing for Vorthon surrender. The numbers were staggering. Traditional galactic warfare between comparable civilizations typically resulted in casualty ratios approaching parity. Humanity had achieved complete tactical superiority, while their enemies suffered devastating losses. The question facing this assembly, Dr. Vasquez continued, is not whether humanity possesses advanced military capabilities. The question is whether the galactic community will uphold the principles that make civilization possible. Ambassador Kethalaran asked the question that every representative was considering. What does humanity require from this assembly? Universal condemnation of attacks on medical personnel and facilities. Formal recognition that hospital ships represent sacred neutrality that must be protected by all civilizations, and acknowledgement that species which violate medical neutrality will face consequences that extend beyond conventional military retaliation. The chamber fell silent as representatives considered humanity's demands. They were essentially being asked to formalize what had always been informal understanding, that medical facilities were off limits to military action. If the galactic community accepts these principles, Dr. Vasquez concluded, humanity will continue to provide medical assistance to all species while maintaining our limited military profile. If these principles are rejected or ignored, we will consider it evidence that civilization itself is under threat. The implication was clear. Humanity was prepared to use their advanced military capabilities to enforce medical neutrality throughout the galaxy, regardless of whether other species approved. Ambassador Lyrian called for a recess to allow representatives to consult with their home governments. As the assembly dispersed, every delegation understood that they were facing a fundamental choice about the future of galactic civilization. Admiral Kethavar stood in the ruins of his command center on Keth Prime, surrounded by the wreckage of what had once been the most advanced military installation in Vorthon space. The biological attack had left most of his personnel paralyzed, and the follow-up kinetic bombardment had systematically destroyed every major military asset in the system. Supreme Admiral, Commander Zraktal reported from his wheelchair, his legs still paralyzed despite receiving the human antidote 3 days earlier. Our deep space monitoring stations are detecting massive energy signatures throughout human space. Kethavar examined the sensor readings with growing dread. Humanity had been relatively quiet for the past week, leading Vorthon Command to hope that their demonstration of superior military capability might be complete. Instead, the energy signatures suggested that humans were preparing something far more devastating. What kind of energy signatures? He asked, though part of him didn't want to know the answer. Sir, the readings are consistent with stellar-scale engineering projects. Multiple star systems are showing coordinated energy patterns that suggest construction on an unprecedented scale. Kethavar felt his confidence crumble as he realized what the humans might be building. If they could launch kinetic projectiles across interstellar distances and deploy biological weapons that selectively targeted specific species, what might they accomplish with stellar-scale engineering? The answer came 18 hours later in a transmission that reached every Vorthon installation simultaneously. Admiral Victoria Hayes appeared on communication screens throughout their empire, standing on the bridge of a vessel that dwarfed any ship in the Vorthon fleet. Admiral Kethavar, Hayes began, humanity offered you the opportunity to surrender after our initial demonstrations of military capability. Your continued resistance indicates that the Vorthon Empire requires a more comprehensive understanding of human warfare. Behind her, the viewports showed a structure that defied Kethavar's understanding of engineering. A massive ring surrounding an entire star, clearly artificial and radiating power outputs that exceeded the total energy production of the Vorthon Empire. What you see is the first completed Dyson ring in human space, Hayes continued. We have constructed similar installations around 12 stars over the past 5 years. Each ring can harness and direct stellar-scale energies for whatever purposes we choose, Kethavar realized, with mounting horror that humanity had been preparing. for this conflict long before the attack on the Mercy's dawn. The hospital ship incident had simply provided them with justification to reveal capabilities they had been secretly developing. The kinetic bombardment that destroyed your forward bases represented approximately 1% of our actual firepower, Hayes explained. The biological weapons that disabled your personnel were created using technology we developed for medical research. You have been fighting a species that has weaponized stellar engineering. The transmission showed additional views of human space, revealing construction projects that spanned entire solar systems, orbital platforms that could manufacture fleets of starships, defensive installations that could intercept projectiles moving at significant fractions of light speed, and weapons systems that could direct focused stellar energy across galactic distances. Admiral Kethvar, you destroyed the Mercy's dawn because you believed attacking medical personnel would demoralize humanity and force us to accept Vorthan territorial expansion. Instead, you provided us with justification to demonstrate why we have maintained peaceful relations with all galactic civilizations. Hayes gestured toward tactical displays showing the current state of Vorthan military forces. Your empire has lost 60% of its military capacity fighting what you believed was a peer adversary. In reality, you have been fighting a species that could eliminate your entire civilization without risking a single human life. The display shifted to show real-time images of Vorthan territory. Every major military installation, industrial complex, and population center was highlighted with targeting indicators that updated continuously. We know the location of every Vorthan military asset, industrial facility, and population center in your empire. Our weapons can reach any target within your territory with precision that makes defense impossible. Your shield's armor and defensive systems provide no protection against weapons that manipulate stellar-scale energies. Kethvar understood that conventional surrender negotiations were meaningless when facing an enemy with such overwhelming technological superiority. The humans could have eliminated the Vorthan Empire at any point in the conflict. They had chosen escalation to make their capabilities clear to the entire galaxy. However, Hayes continued, humanity does not seek the destruction of the Vorthan Empire. We seek acknowledgement that attacking medical personnel violates principles that civilized species must uphold. The terms that Hayes offered were surprisingly lenient given humanity's demonstrated capabilities. The Vorthans would publicly acknowledge their violation of medical neutrality, provide reparations to the families of personnel killed aboard the Mercy's dawn, and agree to formal protection of medical facilities throughout their territory. You have 48 hours to respond to these terms, Hayes concluded. If the Vorthan Empire chooses to continue this conflict, we will demonstrate that stellar engineering can be used for purposes beyond construction and power generation. The transmission ended with views of human installations throughout their territory, each one representing technological capabilities that exceeded Vorthan understanding by centuries. The implications were clear. Humanity had been restraining themselves since first contact with galactic civilization. Commander Zraktal studied the intelligence reports with obvious defeat in his posture. Supreme Admiral, our analysis suggests that the humans have been operating at a significantly lower technological level when interacting with galactic civilization. Everything we thought we knew about their capabilities was deliberately misleading. Kethvar reviewed the terms of surrender one final time. Humanity wasn't demanding territorial concessions, resource extraction, or political submission. They wanted acknowledgement of principles and protection for medical personnel. Sir, Zraktal added quietly, our intelligence networks report that every major civilization in the galaxy received copies of this transmission. The humans aren't just demonstrating their capabilities to us. They're showing every spacefaring species what happens when medical neutrality is violated. The psychological impact extended far beyond the current conflict. Humanity had revealed that they possessed technology that could threaten any civilization while maintaining the moral authority that came from fighting to protect medical personnel. Prepare a formal response, accepting their terms, Kethvar ordered, and ensure that every Vorthan military commander understands that medical facilities are permanently off limits to military action. As he composed his surrender message, Kethvar understood that the galaxy had fundamentally changed. Humanity had established themselves as protectors of medical neutrality, with capabilities that made enforcement possible on a galactic scale. The age of attacking hospital ships with impunity was over. 6 months after the Vorthon surrender, Dr. Elena Vasquez stood on the observation deck of the newly constructed medical station Mercy's Legacy, watching construction crews put the finishing touches on humanity's most advanced hospital facility. Built in the same system where the Mercy's Dawn had been destroyed, the station served as both a memorial to the murdered medical personnel and a symbol of humanity's commitment to galactic medical neutrality. The station was 10 times larger than any previous human medical facility, equipped with treatment capabilities for over 200 known species and research laboratories that pushed the boundaries of xenobiological medicine. More significantly, it was protected by defensive systems that incorporated the same stellar-scale technology that had forced Vorthon's surrender. Dr. Vasquez called Director Sarah Chen, who had been promoted to oversee the new facility. "Our first patients are requesting clearance to dock. The Zephyrian transport carries casualties from the mining accident in the Rigel system." Vasquez nodded approvingly. Within hours of the station becoming operational, emergency calls had begun arriving from across the galaxy. Word had spread that humanity's new medical facility could treat conditions that were considered incurable by conventional galactic medicine. "Grant clearance and prepare. Trauma Bay 7 for Zephyrian physiology. Alert Dr. Reeves that we may need her expertise with silicon-based biochemistry." Dr. Sarah Reeves, the xenobiologist who had developed the biological weapons used against the Vorthons, had requested reassignment to medical research following the conflict. Her knowledge of alien physiology, originally weaponized for warfare, was now being applied to developing revolutionary medical treatments. As the Zephyrian transport docked, Vasquez reflected on how dramatically the galaxy had changed since humanity revealed their true capabilities. The Galactic Council had formally adopted the Medical Neutrality Accords, establishing unprecedented protections for hospital ships and medical personnel throughout known space. Dr. Vasquez, Director Chen reported, "We're receiving priority communications from the Galactic Council. Ambassador Lyrian is requesting a status update on our medical research programs. The political implications of humanity's medical advancement were as significant as their military demonstrations had been. When humans applied stellar-scale engineering to medical research, they achieved breakthroughs that other species had considered impossible. Tell Ambassador Lyrian that our xenobiological research has identified potential treatments for the Regelian genetic plague and the Centauri neural deterioration syndrome. We should have preliminary results within 3 months. These were diseases that had plagued their respective species for generations, considered incurable by conventional galactic medicine. Humanity's approach to medical research, backed by virtually unlimited energy from their Dyson rings, was producing solutions at an unprecedented pace. Captain Marcus Torres, former tactical officer aboard the Shadow's Edge, now commanded the station's defensive systems. He monitored sensor readings that showed peaceful traffic throughout the system, a stark contrast to the devastation that had occurred here 6 months earlier. "Dr. Vasquez," he reported, "we're detecting 12 ships requesting emergency medical assistance. Multiple species, various medical conditions. Should we prepare for mass casualty protocols?" "Grant clearance to all vessels," Vasquez replied immediately. The Mercy's legacy was built to demonstrate that humanity's commitment to preserving life extends to any species, under any circumstances. The irony was not lost on anyone present. The same technological capabilities that had devastated Vorthon military forces were now being used to provide medical care that exceeded anything previously available in galactic civilization. Admiral Victoria Hayes arrived aboard the station 3 hours later, having traveled from Earth to witness the facility's first day of operations. She found Dr. Vasquez in the central medical bay, observing surgery on a draconian patient whose injuries had been considered fatal by conventional standards. "Doctor," Hayes said quietly, "I wanted to personally thank you for your service during the Vorthon conflict. Your representation at the Galactic Council helped establish the precedent that attacking medical personnel carries consequences beyond conventional retaliation." Vasquez watched the surgical team work with precision that would have been impossible without human technological advancement. Admiral, I keep thinking about Captain Chen and the crew of the Mercy's Dawn. They died believing that medical neutrality was sacred to civilized species. Their sacrifice wasn't meaningless, Hayes replied. Every hospital ship operating in Galaxy now carries protections that were established with their blood. The medical neutrality accords ensure that what happened to the Mercy's Dawn can never happen again. The surgical observation gallery filled with representatives from various species, as word spread about the advanced procedures being performed aboard the station. Many were government officials whose civilizations had previously been unable to treat conditions that humans now addressed routinely. Admiral, Vasquez continued, our intelligence reports suggest that several species are attempting to reverse engineer our medical technology. They're particularly interested in our biological research capabilities. Hayes smiled grimly. Let them try. The same technology that created species-specific biological weapons also created species-specific medical treatments. Our research capabilities depend on computational power and energy resources that other species simply don't possess. The conversation was interrupted by an emergency alert from the communications center. Director Chen's voice echoed through the station's intercom system with obvious urgency. All senior staff to the communications center immediately. We're receiving a priority transmission from the Vorthon Empire. Admiral Hayes and Dr. Vasquez hurried to the communications center, where the main display showed Admiral Kethvar appearing somewhat humbled compared to his previous transmissions. The paralysis caused by human biological weapons had been completely reversed, but the psychological impact remained evident. Admiral Hayes, Dr. Vasquez, Kethvar began. I am contacting you to request medical assistance for a plague outbreak in the outer regions of Vorthon space. Our medical facilities are inadequate to address the crisis, and we estimate over 2 million casualties without immediate intervention. The request carried profound symbolic significance. 6 months earlier, the Vortons had attacked a human hospital ship. Now they were asking for human medical assistance to save their own people. Admiral Kethvar, Hayes responded, the Mercy's legacy is equipped to handle large-scale medical emergencies. We can have medical teams in Vorthon space within 48 hours. Kethvar's relief was obvious. Admiral, I want to formally acknowledge that the Vorthon attack on the Mercy's Dawn violated every principle that makes galactic civilization possible. My people are alive today because humanity chose mercy over vengeance. As the transmission ended, Dr. Vasquez realized that humanity had achieved something unprecedented in galactic history. They had used overwhelming military force to establish moral principles that would protect medical personnel throughout known space. Admiral, she said, the crew of the Mercy's Dawn would be proud to know that their sacrifice led to protections for every hospital, ship in the galaxy. Hayes nodded as she watched. Medical teams prepare for deployment to assist their former enemies. Dr. Vasquez, humanity learned something important during the Vorthon conflict. Sometimes the most effective way to preserve peace is to demonstrate that attacking healers carries consequences that extend beyond conventional warfare. The Mercy's legacy represented more than advanced medical technology. It was proof that humanity would use any capability necessary to protect the principles that made civilization possible, while extending mercy to any species that requested help. In the end, the galaxy learned that humans didn't just fight harder than other species. They fought for ideals that transcended the typical motivations of territorial expansion and resource acquisition. And when they won, they used their victory to build hospitals rather than monuments to conquest.